Today, we're talking all about the best lenses for wedding photography.
Keep waving. This is good stuff, man.
Welcome back to the 30 days. These 30 days. Today, we're talking about... That was terrible. Why did I leave this in? Today, we're talking about the best lenses for wedding photography, as well as the lenses that I personally use. I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this 30-day series, which is Focal. Focal is if you saw last week, they built my website for me. I had an onboarding call with them, and then they just made me a website. The first draft was pretty much exactly what I wanted, and now it is live out there on the internet. Focal also comes with a number of layers. So that's the top layer that for the month of January, maybe a quick mention of this, there's usually a $900+ setup fee to get your website, the first draft created and to get it online. During the month of January, if you go to the link in the description and you put your email in and you add yourself to that list, that setup fee will be waived. So you'll do a Zoom call and you'll tell them what you want in a website, what you don't want. You can use your own website if you currently have one as an example, or other people's websites, and they will go out and they will build a draft for you. So that's the awesome top layer, that now you have an amazing website that has proper SEO, that they know all of the actual things that I have no idea about when it comes to advanced search algorithm functionality. And then the second layer of that is actually something that is very, very crucial to a wedding photography business, and specifically the efficiency of a wedding photography business. And it is the CRM layer, which is all of your customer relationship management, which means that when you send a contract to somebody, that you can just do that through Focal, and then you can take the payment through your website as well. So basically, rather than having like 10 systems like I had forever, kind of all piecing together and taking PayPal credit card payments and stuff, now all of a sudden it just all happens in one place. And then to add I'm going to call it the bonus layer of Focal, is the marketplace. So when people are searching for a wedding photographer in your city, there's a pretty good chance that your packages are going to pop up. It's pretty cool, and I 100% recommend that you go check them out and add your name to that list if you want the free website design. If it's after January, it's still an incredible deal. So go check them out. Today, lenses for wedding photographers. If you have done any sort of research on the internet about lenses for wedding photography, you've probably seen the 24-70 pop up a lot. And that is what I would consider to be maybe so I personally, I don't use a 24-70, but I would say that it is the most recommended in general lens, because it can kind of do everything that you'd want on an entire wedding day. The benefit, or I guess the negative in the past, used to be that at some point it would get too dark to use even a 2.8 lens. But now with the high ISO performance of cameras, you really won't find that limit. So you can technically use it within all situations if you want on a wedding day. The reason that I personally use primes, one, in the beginning, it was cost savings, that it's expensive to get a good quality 24-70. I also, as a wedding photographer, like the idea of having a backup. So if I put all my money into a 24-70 and that lens went down, or the zoom jammed, or the aperture sticks open, there's a number of issues that could happen. If that's your main lens and you're used to that on the wedding day, you need a second one of those. When you have primes, you can have a number of them, all for usually less money than that single lens, and you have backup. So if my 50 goes down, I have an 85. My 85 goes down, I have a 35. I can still finish the day. To talk to my specific preferences and something that I just really enjoy the look of, aesthetically, I like the look of primes. You can get shallower depth of field, and you can just make things look a little bit prettier than maybe what it was in real life. For wedding photography, you're usually finding yourself in situations that maybe there's no set decorator. Nobody came in and decorated everything. There's a pretty good chance that there's just stuff all over, people everywhere, somebody wearing a weird color of outfit that's in the background. And if you can make that all disappear into a nice, creamy, out of focus bokeh, all of a sudden your images are going to look a heck of a lot better. So that's one of the reasons that I enjoy primes. You can get shallower depth of field, more aesthetically pleasing images. They're also smaller. So to maybe speak to that quickly, I feel like when you're at a wedding day, if you had a big 70-200 on your camera and you're in the cocktail hour, people are gonna know. They're gonna be kind of like, I'm aware of this photographer. You come in with a Canon R6 and this 50, no one's really gonna they'll kind of know you're the photographer, but you're going to be able to fly under the radar a little bit more. This goes positively and negatively. A weird, stupid thing in the industry, or I guess the world, is that if you are a female wedding photographer and you have a small camera, people aren't going to take you as seriously as a female photographer with a big camera. It's really dumb. I'm sorry that this is a thing, but it really is something that becomes a problem, specifically for family formals usually, that if there's a bunch of other people around you with cameras and you're trying to take the photos, they are going to be getting eye contact a lot more than you. So unfortunately, sometimes you need a bigger camera to maintain audience attention. It's dumb. Sorry. But the rest of the day, if you want to be a fly on the wall, smaller lenses are where it's at. The first lens that I would recommend that you get, 50 millimeter. This is the Canon 50 millimeter f1.8. And I think every manufacturer has something similar to a 50 millimeter f1.8. It's usually pretty inexpensive. Just the physics, the optical formula that has to go into to create a 50, I think is just pretty easy and cost effective for them to do. So you get a bit of a discount on a fantastic lens. My friend Sam Hurd pretty much shoots everything on a 50. He uses sometimes this actually, but also sometimes the bigger, heavier version. So if you got an additional couple $1,000 just burning a hole in your pocket, by all means go for the more expensive stuff. It is heavier, but I'm honestly quite happy with the smaller kit. With something like a 24-70, you're shooting it all day. It is, by the end of the day, it is heavy if it's 10, 12-hour wedding day. Something like this, no problems at all. That you'll feel like a spring chicken. I don't know. Is that a thing? Actually, that's not true. For the first bunch of weddings, we'll talk about this over the next couple of weeks, but for the first few weddings, you'll leave and you'll be pretty tired regardless of what you bring. Learn to hydrate. It will legitimately help you throughout a wedding day and help you with the hangover the next day. So 50 millimeter lens, first lens that you should get, I think, as a wedding photographer. That is what I would do. That is what I would recommend that you do. I think there's also some learning in shooting primes as well, that you have. These don't zoom. So whatever the frame is, that is the frame. So you have to learn kind of what works within that frame. And I feel like it's easier to learn in that kind of that smaller box than it is if you can just kind of zoom around a scene and just find compositions within it. That's something that I guess maybe I enjoyed the process of. There's also, I guess, when you look at all the, I'm going to say a lot of the masters of photography are street photographers, and a lot of them pretty much shoot an entire career on one lens or one focal length, or maybe a couple of close focal lengths, like a 28 and a 35 or something like that. And something that we can take as wedding photographers kind of from that scene is that when you work so closely with a specific lens, you know exactly what those frame lines are before you even pull your camera up to your face. And to let whatever the scene is going to be happen and watch the scene as it's happening and then get ready for the exact decisive moment. That's a little bit better than just shooting 100 frames all through the scene, or maybe attracting attention, or in the case if you're using flash, that you can wait for everything to be exactly where you want it to be, and then you can capture the image and not attract too much attention. I think maybe I'm out to lunch here, but I feel like there's something kind of good in there. And I can definitely, I would say, while the 50 was my first recommendation due to, I guess, cost and just general usefulness, I can get pretty close if I kind of ballparked what a 50 frame line was, but I can be almost exact with my 85 or my 35 because I use those lenses a little bit more. So 50, cost-effective way to just start creating amazing images, general enough that you can you could go through an entire wedding day on one of these. It's nice to have something longer, especially if you're at a larger wedding, but yeah, you can get a lot done with this 50. Next up, 35. This was the first lens that I got for the Canon RF series. This is the 35 f1.8. It's also a macro lens, which is amazing. So if you're a wedding photographer and you want to do those ring photos, you don't have to bring an additional lens with you. You can just shoot it with this. This is the lens that is typically on my second camera. So I shoot with two cameras. I have two Canon R6s right now. If you see me bouncing around gear throughout the year, know that it is because I'm also a YouTube creator, that I do have to use some different things in order to create different videos. And I use a Nikon Z6 II kit quite often as well. But I would say probably my main kit, the one that I'm grabbing the most, is probably the Canon R6. At some point, you might see me go for the Canon R3, which is the larger version of it. And I don't think that it's a requirement necessarily to get something like the R3. It's just, it's a nice to have, I guess. So if I bounce around a little bit and you're watching it, don't be upset that you bought these things, because these things are kind of the key pieces that I use. 35, I think, is the best lens, the most useful lens for the entire Canon RF system. beyond just wedding days, it also has image stabilization in it as well, which doubles with the embodied stabilization in your camera, which means that if you're doing video content, you have incredibly stable footage in just kind of run and gun style environments. So I use it a lot for video as well, outside of weddings as well as at weddings. This 35 something that is very, very nice to have. I would say you could probably shoot an entire wedding day on, or most of a wedding day. The exception would be during, I guess, like the actual ceremony would be a little bit difficult to get up close enough for a 35. So you need something a little bit longer for that. If you are more of an extroverted personality and you're just comfortable being kind of in the scene, you can create work that looks a lot better, I think, than me chilling with my 85 in the back, picking up shots kind of over shoulders and whatnot. If you can actually be in there and you're comfortable with that, and that's the way that your clients expect you to be, and you're happy working like that, you can definitely probably do pretty much an entire wedding day on a 35. And the benefit, I guess we'll talk about the 85 millimeter lens next, but the benefit of shooting a little bit wider is that you actually do feel like you're in the scene, like you're part of the memory. When you get to 85, and especially when you get to kind of a 70 to 200, you start to definitely feel the space in the scene. So you can feel that compression. You can feel that that image wasn't captured from actually in the scene, that it was from somewhere else, which is something that I guess is important for you to kind of figure out where your boundaries are. To speak to kind of my boundaries, I love shooting with an 85. I'm super happy with it. I like the images that it creates. I'm a little bit more introverted and quiet and shy, so I can create better work with it. I can get a little bit closer optically than I had to be in real life, and I feel like that helps me create better images. But the same scene shot with an 85 versus a 35, most people are going to prefer a 35 shot, to be completely honest. Next up, 85 millimeter lens. This is what I would consider to be my main lens. It is on my camera number one pretty much all day, unless there is a reason to not. I have definitely arrived at wedding days and been like, oh, we're doing the wedding in here today. Okay, great. And I'll have to swap that. And the 35 will be my main lens for that day, just because the environment is too small, or the ceremony space is just, it's just challenging, and I need to have the extra wideness. I like 35. So maybe to backtrack just a quick second, a 35 or a 24 or a 20 or a 28. I think it's important to have that wide angle lens. 35 for me feels, I know 28 is technically the wide where you don't get the distortion. So basically, we'll talk about this lens in a second, but as you can see, like pretty crazy wide angle distortion, right? As things get closer to the lens, they really get weird. A 35 kind of removes most of that. A 28 is also pretty good. When you get down to 24, all of a sudden you start getting some of that. And if you want to use that as like an artistic element, that's awesome. What I find for wedding photography is 35 kind of feels the nicest for a wide lens for me. That's just, again, personal preference. 24, 28, 20, whatever you want for wide, but it is important to have a wide angle lens. Back to the 85. The 85 is my favorite lens for a number of reasons. The images that come off, this is specifically the Samyang 85 millimeter f 1.4. So to speak to what the actual F numbers mean, I guess I should have done this at the beginning. F stops, basically the smaller the number, the shallower the depth of field is going to be. So something like a 1.4, it's going to have a pretty shallow depth of field. If I was shooting an 85 f4, so just f4 total, you're going to see a little bit more depth of field. Focal length also kind of comes into play there, that if you're shooting a wide angle lens, a lot more is just going to naturally be in focus. Whereas when you're on a telephoto lens, a longer lens, you're going to get shallower depth of field from that. So there are a few different elements that kind of go into play, but for the most part, I shoot this thing at 1.4. So I shoot it wide open, and unless I'm given a reason not to, or maybe we're doing family formals and there's two groups of people that kind of standing behind or something like that I need increased depth of field. If it's just a couple, they're holding hands walking towards me, as long as they're close to the same plane of focus. At 1.4, I am usually the happiest with the images. I also enjoy, not out of focusness, but I enjoy a certain level of softness to the images as well, that I feel like the 85 really helps give me. And it really does just help me create images that I am personally very happy with, and I know that my clients are as well. There is an additional lens, or two additional lenses we'll talk about. The 70 to 200 that I definitely use Usually I call it kind of the ceremony lens, that if I'm out photographing a ceremony and I kind of want to get all the shots I want, but I don't want to have to be running around. If you're on an 85, you gotta walk a little bit more than maybe you want to. With a 70 to 200, all of a sudden you can kind of zoom around the scene. I would say a 70 to 200 f2.8 would be the ideal, but you could also get by with 70 to 200 f4. If you know you're going into a wedding day where the ceremony is going to be very dark, or you're in a church with not a whole lot of light, you may want to invest in renting a lens, like a 70 to 200, but you can just rent them rather than actually buying them. They're quite expensive, especially if you're buying the newer mirrorless versions. They're very, very expensive. And for how much I use them, I don't necessarily want to recommend that you go out and buy one, but definitely consider renting one, because it will help you do your job a lot better and to capture the images that people are expecting you to get. All right, now the last lens, I did the demo up here, and the last lens is one that I guess I was very, very happy that Canon released this very specific one. It is a 16 millimeter f2.8. I don't think that it's, I guess Sony makes one now, I guess. And Nikon makes I guess the 20 1.8. To have a very, very small and somewhat inexpensive, comparatively to the more expensive L primes for sure. And something that is so tiny, it's, I know it's on my camera now, but it is this size. That's how big it is. And for me to have a super wide angle lens that I can put in my bag, and I will not use it at every single wedding. I will use it at I probably do use it at every wedding, but I don't use it a whole lot at every wedding. But what it will do is that if you are ever kind of backed into a corner and you're in a room like this and you're like, oh, how do I do a group shot with 27 people? That is the way to kind of get yourself out of that, as well as sometimes end of the night, the cake cutting, sometimes the cake's in a very weird spot and you got the wide angle lens on. I can usually get through with 35. It's not a problem. But if, I guess also depending on the number of people and also how aggressive people are, I've done a few different weddings where people really want their photos of the cake being cut as well, and you will get kind of swarmed in there. And to have a wide angle lens for you to put on your camera so you can be just kind of as close to the people as you possibly can be, and to have a wide angle lens in those situations is very, very, very nice. So I would recommend getting one. A 35 will get you through pretty much all of the time. I'm pretty comfortable. Like if I just went to a wedding day with these specific items, the 50, the 35, and the 85, most wedding days I'm going to be very happy. But every now and then I do have to use, the secret is if you don't have a super wide angle lens, is you use either a 35 or 24 and you do panoramas. So say there's 45 people in front of you and you're 10 feet away from them, you take panorama images. So I would do it vertically, vertical frames kind of across the scene, and then come back and merge them all in post-production. There's a little bit of risk that maybe things won't mesh or some people are moving or whatever. Make sure you leave overlap. That's kind of been my hack, at least for if I ever just can't get wide enough. But now that this 16 millimeter lens exists, I am super, super happy with that. So yeah, those are my suggestions for wedding photography lenses. Other notables to mention, if there's a 105 or a 135, the Canon 135 f2 is an amazing wedding lens. What I personally found, again, coming back to my preference, was that it's a little bit heavy and it's a little bit long for how often I use it. So I just didn't end up bringing it to a lot of weddings. These are kind of the lenses that I bring, or at least these four, including the one that's on the camera right now, are the four that I bring to every single wedding day. And then depending on the day, I will also bring a 7200 sometimes as well. So yeah, that is my experience after about 1,000 weddings, I would say. So take from that what you want. I have been super happy with the kit that I've been using, and I feel like it helps me create amazing work. And that is all. Thank you again to Focal. If you're interested in getting your website, head on over to the link in the description below. That $900 plus setup fee is waived if you sign up in January. So sign up, get on the waiting list, and then you'll set up a call and you can talk and you can be like, yeah, I like these 3 websites and this is kind of who I am. Make me a thing, and the thing will be made. It's a beautiful thing. And then you get a full back-end system too. So you can do all your messaging for payment reminders. I feel like that's one of the awkward things too, that as at least when I was first getting into the industry, it was always like, oh, hey, just your final payment's due. Please send it. I feel awkward asking for this much money. And now to have it kind of automated through a system, I feel like it kind of removes you from the money taking process. So it made me feel better. Maybe this is stupid. Maybe this is only a me issue. But it does make my business life run a little bit happier. And then you get on the marketplace as well. You get organically discovered and you get some bookings. That's all for today. I will see you again tomorrow for the 30 days of wedding photography videos with some film photography videos just thrown in every Monday just for fun, you know? All right. See you tomorrow.